Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is December 15th, and we're on page 43 in your magazines. Today, we're going to hear part one of a two-part series on a very, very famous author and probably his most famous work.
Of course, we're talking about A Christmas Carol. Our title today is Redemption in A Christmas Carol, and we can see A Christmas Carol in italics, so we know that this is being emphasized. This is the title of our book.
This story becomes very, very popular every year around Christmas time. And in fact, the story A Christmas Carol helped form the customs that we now follow at Christmas time in America and in England.
Absolutely. In fact, I would like to plant a flag right here, right now, and say that this is perhaps maybe the second most important transformation into modern Christmas. The Christmas tree is a new thing in England at the time. And of course, this is an ancient custom otherwise, but it's new to England. Then you have Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. You can't sing Jingle Bells. You can't sing The Little Drummer Boy or We Three Kings. You can't sing We Wish You a Merry Little Christmas because those songs...
A Merry Christmas.
A Merry Christmas. Because those songs haven't been written sometimes up to, you need to wait more than 100 years. This is perhaps the reimagining of Christmas as a great event centered around charity.
They didn't even really have the expression Merry Christmas until this time. It became popular after this book. In England in general, they also say Happy Christmas a lot. They don't always say Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I don't know where the split from that comes from. I actually looked it up one time, and I couldn't find a decisive answer. Merry Christmas dates from the 1500s, but it was not a common phrase until, just like Karen said, until after this book was written. So, I mean, really, in terms of if you traveled back to Christmas with Charles Dickens here, it would be somewhat recognizable, but many of the things we think about today, especially like in a Taiwan Christmas, which is like the big, bright, bold colors of Christmas, they don't exist yet.
Yeah, that's right. So around Christmas time, I can really recommend a movie version of this story. And there are a lot of them around, but the one that we used to play almost every year in my classes at Taiwan University was one with George C. Scott. It is wonderful. It's just so enjoyable. If you can, try to watch that this Christmas.
If you're looking for perhaps an animated version, I am very fond of the Mickey Christmas Carol, which follows very closely. It's a lovely animated movie, and I recall it came out when I was just 6 years old in 1988. I still love it.
That's another good one. Okay, so it's great to read the story, but it's also great to watch the animation or watch the movie version. It will be a lot easier to read the book after you have seen it on the screen.
I agree.
Yeah. Let's get started. Our title again is Redemption in A Christmas Carol. Now, what is redemption?
Well, redemption is when I'm trying not to use formal English here, but to deliver or save somebody from sin. Sin are the bad things you do in the world. It's actually related to the word redeem and ransom. And ransom is when you make someone your prisoner for money. In the past, interestingly, for redemption, you used to be able to pay the church a lot of money to say, I forgive you. That is not what happens here.
All right. So like Chris said, the verb version is redeem, R-E-D-E-E-M, R-E-D-E-E-M. Redeem is also used when you hock something, when you pawn something. H-O-C-K, hock, or P-A-W-N, pawn. That means you take it to a special kind of store where you bring your watch or your diamond ring and you ask for a loan. And they will give you money, and if you can't pay back the loan, they keep your ring or your watch. So that is a pawn shop. So when you have enough money to get your watch or ring back, you redeem your ring or your watch.
We also had those little, I forget how much money it was, the coupons that the Taiwanese government gave earlier in the year because of coronavirus. And you got those little papers from 7-Eleven, and you can spend them. You redeem those certificates.
I forgot about it. I better hurry up and redeem mine. Haven't used them yet. Oh, otherwise it's a big waste of 1,000 NT. We better get to our story. Paragraph 1. It is a cold Christmas Eve as Ebenezer Scrooge shuffles through the London streets. His family had invited him over for a nice holiday dinner, but he declined. Scrooge has always hated holidays and would rather be alone. Although Scrooge is a wealthy businessman, he doesn't have many friends. All he cares about in life is making money, and he won't share it with anyone. He walks past two men collecting money for charity. When they ask Scrooge for a donation, he angrily shouts, "Bah! Humbug!" and chases them away.
Later that evening, Scrooge receives an unexpected visitor at his home. The ghost of Jacob Marley, his old business partner, suddenly appears in the middle of the night. Marley's ghost has metal chains and money boxes wrapped around his body. He tells Scrooge that this is his punishment for being a selfish and greedy person when he was alive. Marley warns Scrooge that he will suffer the same fate if he doesn't change his ways. Before leaving, Marley tells Scrooge that 3 ghosts will visit him soon.
First, the ghost of Christmas past arrives and transports Scrooge back to his childhood, where they witness scenes from Scrooge's school days. Scrooge sees himself talking to Fan, his sister who passed away many years ago. He also meets his old boss, Mr. Fezziwig, who was like a father to Scrooge. Then Scrooge watches his first love, Belle, break up with him and call off their marriage. He listens to her explain that she's leaving him because he's too selfish and loves money more than her. As Scrooge relives this painful memory, he starts to cry. The ghost brings Scrooge to Belle's house to see how her life turned out. He learns that she has a big family and is much happier without Scrooge. Lucky her. She missed a lot of trouble that way. Okay, so redemption in A Christmas Carol, that means in the story A Christmas Carol, somebody redeems himself. It's masculine here. That means he gets forgiveness for being a terrible person in the past in this case. So the first sentence, it is a cold Christmas Eve as Ebenezer Scrooge shuffles through the London streets. One thing about Charles Dickens, and by the way, watch your pronunciation of Charles, because I've had students do a book report on books like Great Expectations, and they say this book is by Charles Dickens. I've heard this many times, and these were students who prepared to give an oral report. And I warned them, check the pronunciation of the author, and they still said Charles Dickens, which is wrong. You didn't hear that. Charles is how you say it correctly, so Charles Dickens. One thing about Charles Dickens is he chose the names of his characters in his stories very carefully. Ebenezer sounds like a very old man, and an old man who probably isn't very sociable or very nice. Now, partly it's because I know the story, but Ebenezer is just a very old name. It may have been an old name back in the 19th century.
So Ebenezer Scrooge, it's a name that we can use that feels like a miserly or unhappy person, especially around the holidays. This is someone where you can say, stop being a Scrooge. A lot of times, Charles Dickens invented the names that he used, but not here. He actually saw a tombstone in Edinburgh, and he saw there was a name of a man on his tombstone. It was Ebenezer Lennox Scroggie. And
that's where it comes from.
That's right. And so he was a corn merchant. Corn, when it's ground into powder, is called meal, M-E-A-L. And because he was a corn merchant, it said Ebenezer Lennox Scroggie, meal man. Charles Dickens misread this and thought it said a mean man.
Really?
And this is where the name comes from. Isn't this a bizarre story?
I have never heard that. That is a wonderful story. So he didn't just pull it out of thin air, and that's a great expression. To pull something out of thin air, that means you weren't inspired by anything else. You just thought of it your own self.
But he does do that a lot. We'll see some of those names later.
That's right. So Ebenezer Scrooge, Ebenezer as a name, it's just this very old name. I don't know anybody now named Ebenezer. I can't think of anybody.
It feels very Old Testament, one of the old books of the Bible.
Yeah, or maybe 18th century and earlier. So it's a very old name. And Scrooge, like Chris just explained, is made up. But right now, it just means somebody who is very greedy and very miserly. Miser is M-I-S-E-R. He's a miser. He collects a lot of money, doesn't want to spend any of it, and is very selfish. Okay, so he shuffles through is another great expression. Instead of walking very crisply and quickly with a click, 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 click on the pavement, if you hear somebody making a swishing sound, sort of like shh, that means you're dragging your shoes when you're walking. You're not walking with a very quick step. That is to shuffle along. Usually it's with along. He's shuffling along. But if you have a prepositional object, you are shuffling through the building. That means you're walking through and you're dragging your shoes. Okay, let's go on to the next sentence. His family had invited him over for a nice holiday dinner, but he declined. Now, I can't imagine that. If there is a holiday dinner with your own with a family and you don't have any place to go, why in the world would you turn down free food on a holiday? Because it's usually really good food.
Yeah, this is a good time to eat as much as you want. The word holiday actually comes from two different words. They're very easy words. Holy day. These were the only days you could generally get off in the past. And so on holy days, everyone was really happy. And today we call it a holiday.
Okay, and to decline means to say no. But it's a pretty polite word. It's not as strong as refused. Refused makes it sound like you're pushing it back and you're unhappy about the invitation. Decline is you politely say, no, I'm sorry, I don't think I can make it. Next sentence, Scrooge has always hated holidays and would rather be alone. Now, a lot of people are loners and they don't like holidays. So I can actually understand that. I'm not crazy about holidays myself. But here, it's an extreme case where he doesn't socialize. He just really doesn't have friends. He just wants to be at home alone with his money. Although Scrooge is a wealthy businessman, he doesn't have many friends. So I jumped ahead a little bit. He has a lot of money. He's successful in business, but doesn't have many friends. And when you get to that point, you're going to find that all the money in the world doesn't really have that much value if you have nobody to share things with.
I like that you say businessman. This is a word I say businessman, but there are words where I do the M-A-N becomes min, like fisherman or fireman.
Or postman.
Or postman. It's I don't personally have any consistency with it, and I don't know why some words I say man or min.
Sometimes if I'm being more emphatic, I'll say man. He's a businessman. Okay, don't mess with him. Yeah, if I'm being more emphatic, but we have both pronunciations. Next sentence, all he cares about in life is making money, and he won't share it with anyone. So we've already mentioned that. This is a nice sentence. The structure is really good, so make sure that you can make a sentence just as good as this one. He walks past two men collecting money for charity. Now, in the movie, you will see somebody with a metal pot hanging on a hook from a frame, and there's some coins in it, and there's somebody ringing a bell. You know, it's a pity the poor, pity the poor. Give some money for people who are poor and don't have enough money for a holiday dinner or other holiday festivities. So charity, that's giving money to people who don't have enough money. So there are men there collecting money for charity. That's especially common during holiday seasons, especially Christmas.
Charity is an interesting word. For a long time, in the older versions of the Bible, it was actually translated as Christian love. And even some books, they don't even use this word charity. They just say, give love to your neighbors. And I like this change because it's very specific. When we say charity, I can see someone giving money. When we say give love, it's like, well, what does that mean? A hug? Right. Thank you.
Hug. That's right. And in the Bible, in some translations, you'll say, but these three things, faith, hope, and charity. You know, they're the most important things, but the greatest of these is charity. Some translations say faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. So you'll see both of them with this particular meaning. So here it clearly means collecting money for people less fortunate than you. When they ask Scrooge for a donation, he angrily shouts, "Bah, humbug," and chases them away. Donation is giving money. Don just comes from a Latin word for give. You're giving money freely, and you're not expecting anything in return. He angrily shouts. He yells out loudly, and he's angry at the same time. Bah means, huh, this is a terrible, ridiculous thing to ask me. And humbug means nonsense. That's a bunch of humbug means that's a bunch of nonsense. It's an older word. And if you are somebody who doesn't really enjoy holidays. They'll say, well, Karen, you going to the Christmas party? We're going to have a lot of fun. I'll go, bah, humbug. That means I'm not into that stuff.
This is specifically about Christmas, too. I don't think many people say, like, the 4th of July party or Easter, like,
no.
Humbug. No one says that.
No, it's for Christmas.
This is Christmas.
This is for Christmas. And I might actually say that. All right. And chases them away. So these people, apparently, they don't have a stand there. They're just ringing a bell and holding a pot. So that's really kind of outrageous. Scrooge chases them away, chases after them.
Later that evening, Scrooge receives an unexpected visitor at his home.
Okay, that's pretty easy. So that evening, he's in bed, and normally he doesn't get visitors. He doesn't have friends, but he does have a visitor tonight.
The ghost of Jacob Marley, his old business partner, suddenly appears in the middle of the night.
So Jacob Marley, as it says, is Scrooge's previous business partner, but he's dead. He's now dead. And there he is in the middle of the night in Scrooge's room. It's his ghost.
Marley's ghost has metal chains and money boxes wrapped around his body.
Now, this is symbolic of the burden of wealth and of being selfish and the kind of repayment you'll get for your behavior after you die. So he's a ghost, but he's got these noisy metal chains. We often think of ghosts in chains. That represents the dues you have to pay for the bad things you've done in life. You're going to be bound in chains after you die. And what else? His money boxes. The thing he loved most was money. He brought those to the next life, but he's a prisoner.
He tells Scrooge that this is his punishment for being a selfish and greedy person when he was alive, just like you said.
So some people are afraid what will happen to them after they die. In this case, Marley has come back to warn Scrooge, if you don't change in your ways, if you don't change the way you behave, your attitude, your treatment of other people, you're going to end up like me. You're old, you're going to die, and after you die, you are going to suffer like I'm suffering.
This is your ironic punishment, your karma, and it makes me wonder what my ironic punishment will be.
Oh, dear, I don't want to think about that. So the thing is, try to create good karma. Do good things, not because anybody's watching you, but just because good things will come back to you. That's one reason.
Agreed. Marley warns Scrooge that he will suffer the same fate if he doesn't change his ways.
This is a really great expression, to suffer the same fate. So if you don't pay more attention to what you're doing, you'll suffer the same fate as Bob, who got his hand caught in the machine. So if you're operating a machine and you're not paying attention, you will suffer the same fate as someone else. That means the same bad thing will happen to you. To change your ways is a great expression. You'd better change your ways or you'll be in trouble. That means you have to do something differently in your behavior.
I personally would highlight these two phrases. I agree that these are great. Suffer the same fate and change your ways. Before leaving, Marley tells Scrooge that 3 ghosts will visit him soon.
So this is just the opening act. He's just telling him what is coming. Now, I've come here to warn you, but this isn't the show itself. The real show is a series of 3 ghosts, and they are going to give you some very stern and scary warnings. Okay, let's go on to our last paragraph. First, the ghost of Christmas past arrives and transports Scrooge back to his childhood, where they witness scenes from Scrooge's school days. Now, we look at old people, and especially if you're kind of young, you can't imagine that they were ever children. Even now, at this age, it's still hard for me to imagine people as little boys and little girls. To me, they just look like old people.
That they've always been this way.
They've always been this way. But Scrooge was once a little boy himself, and now the first ghost takes him back to his past when he was a little boy. And what is he going to see? Well, we're going to find out. So to transport somebody means to carry somebody there. Transport, often it's in a vehicle. All right, next sentence. Scrooge sees himself talking to Fan. This is probably short for Fanny. So he's talking to Fan, his sister, who passed away many years ago. Now, there's probably some very sad memories there. He was probably very badly wounded by this experience. He has a sister, and long ago when he was a child, this sister died very young.
So this passed away, I believe we talked about really recently, perhaps last month. This is a polite way to say to die. We don't want to talk so directly about this. So this passed away is a much softer way to say this. this terrible thing that happens.
Right. So, for example, John is late. Oh, yeah, his father just passed away. Mm-hmm. All right. He also meets his old boss, Mr. Fezziwig. I said Fezziwig the first time. I think Fezziwig sounds better. So he also meets his old boss, Mr. Fezziwig, who is like a father to Scrooge. Now, here we have some tenderness coming in. Scrooge seems so mean. But when he was working at a job a long time ago, his boss was named Mr. Fezziwig, and apparently Mr. Fezziwig was very kind to Scrooge.
This reminds me a bit of our author from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, who was very good about inventing names. And here we see Charles Dickens is also a big fan of this.
And wig is something you wear on your head to make up for missing hair. And fezzy sounds a little like fuzzy.
Right,
Somebody
that's what I thought
hair. Too. Okay, so that's one of the funny names. Okay, in the next sentence, then Scrooge watches his first love, Belle, break up with him and call off their marriage. Again, it starts out very tender because Scrooge was once in love with somebody. Her name was Belle, which means beautiful in French. But after being together a while, she said, we're not getting married. You are too selfish. You love money more than me.
When we call something off, we cancel it. I have to say that call off a marriage is probably the most common way I can think to use this.
Yeah, she called the whole thing off. That's right. Next sentence, he listens to her explain that she's leaving him because he's too selfish and loves money more than her. And I've already mentioned that. So if you ever find a guy who loves money more than you, leave. Okay, that's not going to work. As Scrooge relives this painful memory, he starts to cry. All right, now we see that some of this tenderness is having an effect on Scrooge, who didn't seem to have or show any feelings. He's thinking about losing this girl he probably really loved, and for a good reason, because he was such a jerk, J-E-R-K, jerk, someone who behaves badly, and now he's feeling it inside. Some of the hurt is coming out, and he cries. The ghost brings Scrooge to Belle's house to see how her life turned out. So this ghost is going to take Scrooge to another place. And, well, she broke up with him. What happened to her life then? Did she have a terrible life without him? No, just the opposite. Our last sentence, he learns that she has a big family and is much happier without Scrooge. Now that should serve to make you feel lousy.
That's exactly right. And Charles Dickens has a mission here. He didn't write this book without purpose. This wasn't like, hey, I want to write a Christmas story. Charles Dickens, as a young boy, saw his father go to jail for being in debt. His father was kind of bad with money, and he went to jail for it. That was a crime in the past. And Charles Dickens was forced to sell his books. He had to leave school, all because he just didn't have the money, and there was no charity money to give to someone like him. And as he grew up, he looked to try to change this in society. He was very much an activist, and he tried to write letters to government. He tried to organize people. But by far, he found the most effective thing he could do was use his power of letters to change the hearts and minds of people. And that's what the mission of A Christmas Carol is about. Restore the charity to Christmas.
Right. And one reason that memory was so powerful is back in those times when people went to so-called debtor's prison, the whole family moved in. So the wife and kids were there together with Charles' father. Eventually, I believe a grandmother died and left them money. And the money was enough to pay off the debt. So when Charles had to sell off his books and everything, and he went to work in this factory, it was a bootblack factory. He had to paste labels on bottles of bootblack. That's like shoe polish. After they paid off the debt, Charles didn't really have to stay in that job, but his mother felt he should keep on working. And for that reason, he was kind of mad at women.
I think this is something you can see reflected in his writing in the future. This is a time where it's very man-driven society.
Absolutely.
But we're at the end, out of our time today, though, but we will be back tomorrow.
Make sure you tune in then to hear part 2 of Redemption in a